Welcome back to Inside Vietnam. Tonight's story is a little different from the ones we usually tell on this channel. You've heard the cautionary tales. The men who lost the house. The men who lost the savings. The men who flew home with nothing but a cracked phone and a story they'd spend the rest of their lives trying to live down. We tell those stories because they're true, and because the lads who need to hear them aren't going to find them anywhere else. But every now and then, someone walks the same road and somehow keeps his footing. Tonight is one of those. Our man tonight is Declan O'Sullivan, 55 years old, born and raised in Cork, Ireland. 28 years a self-employed plumber, married for 24 of them, until he wasn't. He came to Da Nang with a single suitcase, roughly €32,000 to his name, and a heart so badly broken he'd more or less stopped expecting anything from the future. The Vietnam he found wasn't the one in the YouTube videos, and the woman he met wasn't the one in the warnings. What happened over the year that followed is, in his own words, the story he never thought he'd be the one telling. Stick with this one. The lessons in it might be the most useful we've ever shared on this channel. Here's Declan, in his own words. Right, where do I start? Cork, I suppose. That's where it starts and where most of it ends, if I'm honest with you. My name's Declan. 55 last March. I'm a plumber. Was a plumber. Still am, technically, in a half-arsed way I'll get to. 28 years I had me own outfit. O'Sullivan Plumbing and Heating. Started with one highest van I bought off a cousin for 1,500 quid and a handshake. Drove around Cork City for the first 2 years working out of the back of it. Sleeping in it once or twice when a job ran late and I'd had a few. Built it up. 4 lads working for me by the end. Proper office, proper books, proper everything. The kind of business you build because you think you're building it for someone. You know? I thought I was building it for Siobhan and the girls. Look. I'm not going to drag you through the whole divorce. You don't want to hear it, and I don't want to tell it. The short version is she met a fella at her sister's hen do in Lisbon. Portuguese fella. Worked in marketing, whatever that means. Soft hands, I remember that. I shook his hand once, much later, at a thing I shouldn't have gone to, and I remember thinking, this is the man. This soft-handed fucker. This is who she wanted instead. And I'd been under sinks for 28 years with hands like sandpaper. And that's the end of the story, really, isn't it? 24 years of marriage, 2 daughters. The Irish family courts, in their wisdom, gave her the house in Ballincollig, half the pension, and a slice of the business big enough that I had to sell it to pay her out. The judge read it out, and I just sat there nodding like he'd told me the weather. I think a part of me had already gone somewhere else by then. I don't remember driving home. The girls sided with their mother. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. I'm not going to pretend I didn't earn some of it either, because Christ knows when a marriage ends, nobody's hands are clean. But the phone call stopped. Then the texts stopped. Then I was sending birthday messages and getting the read receipts back like a kick in the teeth. Every single time. 2 daughters. I taught one of them to ride a bike on the marina. Anyway, I ended up in a 1-bed flat in Bishopstown that smelled, no matter what I did, of takeaway curry and damp. 18 months I sat on the same stool at the Bridge Inn. Same stool. Tuesday to Sunday. Pint of Beamish, then another. Then a chaser if the night was bad, and they were mostly bad. The lads behind the bar were lovely about it. They'd ask after me daughters and I'd lie. They'd ask was I working and I'd lie. The lying was the worst part looking back, because at some point the lies became what I had instead of a life. Then one Sunday, Mick comes in. Me brother-in-law on Siobhan's side, but he stayed on with me after, God love him. Mick's half shot before he sits down, which is a Sunday tradition for him. He pulls out his phone and shoves it across the bar at me. There's some lad on YouTube, big grinning English fella with a sunburnt forehead, sitting on a balcony somewhere green. Title says, living like a king in Da Nang for €900 a month. Mick goes, Da Nang, 900 a month, boy. You could go there. Sure, what's keeping you? What's keeping ye in this kip? I laughed at him. I told him to feck off and finish his pint. But I went home that night and I watched another one. Then another. By 2 in the morning, I was deep in it. Couples in Hoi An, retired Aussies in Vung Tau, American fellas teaching English in Saigon, beaches, coffee shops, smiling Vietnamese women laughing at the cameras. By 4 in the morning, I'd watched 40 of them, easy. The flat was freezing, I hadn't eaten. And I noticed, sitting there in the blue light of me phone, that for the first time in 18 months, I'd forgotten about Siobhan for nearly 5 hours. I considered Thailand for about a day. Too obvious. Like Magaluf with palm trees, I thought, with all due respect to Thailand, where I've never been. The Philippines, I worried about me English not being trusted on the lash, which is stupid reason, but it was my reason. Vietnam looked quieter, greener, and the people in the videos seemed to actually like the foreigners, not just tolerate us. I don't know how else to put it. I booked the flight at 5 in the morning. Cork to Heathrow, to Singapore to Da Nang. One way because I couldn't bring myself to commit to coming back. I didn't tell anyone for 3 days. Then I told Mick. Then I told the bank. The bank was easier. The morning I left, I sat in Cork Airport with a single suitcase and a Lavazza coffee in a paper cup, and I rang Mick from the gate. I didn't really know what I was ringing him for. Maybe I half hoped he'd tell me to come home. He didn't. He just said, "Go on, boy, go on." And then he said something I've thought about a lot since. He said, "Whatever you find over there, Deck, just don't go looking for what you lost. You won't find it. Find something else." I told him I would. I didn't really mean it. I had no idea what he was on about, to tell you the truth. I just wanted to be on the plane. And then I was on the plane. Da Nang International. 4:30 in the afternoon, local time. I stepped out of the air-conditioned terminal and into the kind of heat that doesn't feel like weather. It feels like a room you've walked into. Thick, wet, the kind of air you chew rather than breathe. I stood on the pavement with me suitcase and I thought, Jesus Christ, what have you done to yourself, Declan? There were 40 fellas in matching polo shirts holding up signs with names on them. None of the names were mine. I had a grab booking on me phone and I was meant to find car number something something with a green box around it. And I'm standing there, sweating through me good shirt, squinting at the screen, and a young lad with a phone of his own walks up and goes, "O'Sullivan? You O'Sullivan?" And I nearly cried, I'll be honest with ye. The relief of being a recognized man again, even just by a grab driver in a place I couldn't pronounce. The drive in. I don't know what I was expecting. Bangkok, maybe, from films. What I got was different. Greener than I thought. More trees, hills off in the distance with mist hanging on them. And the motorbikes. Ah, lads, the motorbikes. I'd seen them in the videos, but seeing it through a windscreen is another thing entirely. They flow, they don't queue, they don't lane, they just flow around you like a river around a stone. And you're the stone and you haven't even moved yet. Whole families on one bike. A woman with a baby strapped to her chest, helmet on the baby, none on her. A fella with 2 crates of live chickens balanced behind him. A girl in a face mask and pajamas and yellow rubber gloves, on her way to work, I suppose. I stopped trying to make sense of it after about 10 minutes. The driver let me out on a narrow lane in An Thuong. He pointed at a sign. High-end guest house, 3 stories, white-painted concrete, tangle of black wires sagging across the front like someone had thrown a fishing net at it. I'd booked it off Booking.com because it had the best reviews under €25 a night. I went in. The reception was about the size of a phone box. There was a woman behind the desk in a pale blue ao dai with a name badge. "Mr. Declan?" She had this very calm voice, quiet, not soft, not flirty, just calm. The way a doctor might say your name in a waiting room. She had me passport copied and the key in me hand and the Wi-Fi password written down in neat little numbers on a post-it inside of 3 minutes, and she pointed up the stairs and said, "2 floor, number 5, welcome." And that was Lynn. The first time I ever saw her. I didn't think a single thing about her, I'll tell you that for nothing. I went up the stairs, opened the door of room 5, stood the suitcase against the wardrobe, and I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan for about an hour without moving. The first few days I was a write-off. The jet lag, the heat, the everything. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, properly wide awake, and lie there listening to a rooster going off somewhere in the lanes. Actual roosters in a city, who knew? And the first motorbikes coughing into life around 5. By 6, I'd give up and go down to the front door and walk to Mai Kay Beach. It's about 4 minutes from An Thuong if you walk slow, which you do because of the heat. Long beach, properly long. Pale sand. Vietnamese women in big, floppy hats doing aerobics in groups by the water. Old fellas swimming in their underpants, children running about. I'd walk to the end of one stretch of it and sit down and watch the sun come up over the South China Sea. And I'd think about Cork and the marina and the daughter I'd taught to ride a bike there. And I'd swallow a bit and walk back. Breakfast was a banh mi from a cart at the corner of the lane. A woman with a charcoal grill and a stack of baguettes wrapped in newspaper. 30,000 dong. About €1. Pâté, pork, pickled carrot, coriander, a chili sauce that took the back of your head off the first time I tried it. I'd eat it walking back to the guest house. Down the side of me chin half the time. The lanes in An Thuong are narrow and crooked and lovely. Plastic stools outside every door. Old ladies sitting on them shelling peas. Cats asleep on motorbike seats. Incense smoke curling up out of little red shrines tucked at the base of trees. The smell of the place, when I think about it, is petrol and faux broth. And somebody's washing on a balcony. Lynn was at reception every morning when I came back with crumbs down myself. By the third day she said, "Ka fei sua ja, no sugar, yes?" And she had it set on the little reception table in a glass with the iced coffee dripping through one of those metal filters. I hadn't told her I liked them. She'd watched me order one in the Laneway Cafe 2 days running. That's just the kind of thing she did. I tipped her 10,000 dong on it. She looked at it on the desk like a cat looks at a thing it's not sure is food, and then she went, "Mr. Declan, this is the price of nothing. Drink your coffee." And I laughed, which I think might have been the first time I'd laughed in Vietnam. In the evenings, I drank too many Bia Saigons at a place on the corner with red plastic stools and a karaoke machine going full pelt next door. 10,000 dong a can. About 40 cent. The first night, I had 8 of them. I told myself I deserved it. The second night, I had 6 and told myself the same. By the end of the first week, I was on a kind of routine of sadness. Beach, banh mi, coffee, walking aimlessly around in the heat, beer, sleep. It wasn't a life, but it wasn't the Bridge Inn either, you know what I mean. There was no stool with me name worn into it. Then on day, I want to say 12, I got dropped. I'd had a buncha off a cart on the wrong side of An Thuong. I'd been warned vaguely by another guest at the guest house, a German lad with a beard, to mind where I ate. I hadn't minded. By midnight, I was on me hands and knees in the bathroom of room 5, having an argument with me own intestines that I was very much losing. I won't go into it. There's no dignity in food poisoning. There's certainly no dignity in food poisoning at 55 years of age in a guest house in a country where you can't read the back of the medicine boxes. There was an hour, maybe 2. I'd been on the bathroom floor with me cheek against the tile because the tile was cool, where I thought, in a very flat, factual sort of way, I might actually die here. Not in a panicky way, just, oh? So this is how it goes. Right, I didn't come down for breakfast. I didn't come down for lunch. Around 2 in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door, very soft. Then a louder one, then Lynn's voice. "Mr. Declan, you okay? Mr. Declan?" I dragged myself up. I opened the door. I imagine I looked like death warmed up and left out for the cat. She took one look at me, said something in Vietnamese to herself that I think was a prayer or a curse, and she said, "Pharmacy, now. Come." She walked me. 10 minutes through the lanes, holding me elbow when I wobbled. She didn't fuss. She just steered. The pharmacy was a tiny place off Nguyen Van Tho Ai with glass cases full of boxes I couldn't read. She talked to the pharmacist for about 3 minutes, very fast. He looked at me, made a face that said, "Yes, I've seen this before," and he produced about 4 different things. Rehydration salts, charcoal tablets, something for the cramps, something for the nausea. The whole lot came to about 120,000 dong, which is what? €4.50. I paid. Lynn walked me back. She made me drink the rehydration salts in the lobby in front of her. She tasted the water first to make sure I'd mixed it right. Then she sent me up to bed and told me to message reception if I got worse. I didn't get worse. By the next morning, I could keep down a bit of plain rice congee that she sent up with the cleaner. When I came down 2 days later, I tried to give her 200,000 dong for her trouble. About €7.50, not a fortune, but it was the gesture of it I wanted to make. She was at the reception desk doing some paperwork. I put the note on the desk between us. She looked at it, then she looked at me. The expression on her face, I'm not sure I can describe it. It wasn't angry, it was almost embarrassed for me. She slid the note back across the desk like it was something I'd dropped without noticing. Mr. Declan, no. This is not for money. You are alone. You're sick. I have a son. If my son is alone in Ireland and sick, I hope someone will help him, that is all. I stood there with the note in me hand, feeling like an absolute Egypt. I said sorry. She said very gently, "It is okay. Drink your coffee." I went up to me room. I rang Mick on Skype. It was 8 in the morning at home, so he was just up, putting the kettle on, complaining about something to do with his car. And I was telling him about the food poisoning, making a joke of it. And somewhere in the middle of it, me voice went sideways on me. Out of nowhere. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in a guest house 7,000 miles from Cork, with the fan ticking over me head, telling a story I thought was funny, and I'd started crying without noticing. I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't have told Mick either, and he was good enough not to ask. He just sort of waited until I was done, and then he said, "Right, so, what are you having for your dinner?" That night I went down to reception and I extended the booking another 2 weeks. I told myself it was the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was great, I said to Lynn. Best Wi-Fi I'd had since landing. She wrote it into the system without smiling and gave me a new key card. I went back up to room 5 and lay on the bed with the fan ticking over me, and for the first time since the divorce, I fell asleep before midnight without drinking myself stupid first. So, I extended the 2 weeks, then I extended another 2 on top of that. Don't make a big thing of it, I told myself. The room's grand, the lane's grand, you don't need to be running off anywhere just yet. It took me about a week to work up to asking Lynn out for dinner, which is mortifying when I write it down. 55 years of age. I had to sort of rehearse it walking back from my K one morning. I muttered it to myself in a couple of different ways like an actual lunatic. A young Vietnamese woman selling pineapple from a basket gave me a wide berth. The first time I asked her, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Declan. Tonight my son has his lessons. I cannot." Smiled, polite, didn't make a thing of it. Wrote something down in the booking ledger and moved on. The second time, 2 days later, she said, "I have shift until 10 o'clock. I am sorry." Same smile. Same moving on. I'm not going to lie to you, after the second no, I had a bit of a sulk about it on the corner over a Bia Saigon. Told myself I'd been an Egypt. Told myself she was just being nice because that's the job, you know? That's what they do at the front desk. Told myself I should leave the poor woman alone. Drank another one. Told myself maybe one more go. The third time, she paused. She looked at the calendar pinned behind the desk and she looked back at me and she said, "Sunday evening. My sister will come also. Is okay?" And I went, "Grand, lovely, yeah, whoever you like." I went back up the stairs and sat on the bed and laughed at myself. Bringing her sister. Of course she's bringing her sister. Of course she is. I half expected her to bring her mother as well. Sunday evening then. Hot Pot Place a few minutes walk from the guest house. One of those plastic stool affairs on the pavement off a side street. No English on the menu. A gas burner on each table and a row of women out the front shouting orders at each other across the steam. I was the only foreigner in the place. Lynn in a yellow blouse and her sister Hang, younger, maybe early 30s, pixie haircut, much sharper-eyed. Hang spoke better English than Lynn, by a fair bit. And she got straight into it, polite but straight in. How long was I in Vietnam? Was I married? Was I divorced? Did I have children? How old were the children? Did the children speak to me? Why not? What did I do for work in Ireland? Did I plan to work in Vietnam? How long was my visa? Did I drink a lot? Did I drink every day? Did I gamble? Had I been to Thailand? She asked all this in this very even, almost conversational tone, the way you'd ask a fellow what football team he supports. Lynn sat beside her ordering dishes and not interrupting. I answered everything honestly because I was too knackered and too far from home to dress any of it up. She nodded a lot. At one point, she said something to Lynn in Vietnamese, and Lynn said something back, and they both went quiet for a minute. And I thought, that's it now. I've failed the interview. Then Hang cracked a tiny smile and said, "Okay, you eat." The food kept coming. Beef, prawns, mushrooms, water spinach, slices of taro, a bowl of rare-looking offal I gave a wide berth. Lynn dropped things into the broth in the right order and fished them out for me when they were done. I burned the roof of me mouth on a prawn and Hang laughed at me. I did the proper thing, Me Da would have killed me otherwise, and got up to pay before they could. Hank said in a slightly arch way, "Ah, the Irish gentleman." Lynn said, "Thank you, Mr. Declan." And that was the dinner. Walking back in the dark, I realized something. Not in a big light bulb way, just sort of slowly. The dinner had been better, knowing the sister was there. There was no pressure. I hadn't had to be charming. I hadn't had to be a fella on a date with a younger woman, which would have been ridiculous on me anyway. We'd just had a meal. And I knew, walking up the lane, that I respected Lynn more for the sister than I would have if she'd come on her own. Because she didn't know me from Adam. Because she had a son. Because she was being careful. That same week, I started thinking about the long term, the maths. I'd done a quick budget on the back of a napkin in the Bridge Inn before I left Cork. €32,000 to me name. If I could keep me costs to $900 a month, the magic number from the YouTube videos, that's nearly 3 years. 7 years still to go before me. Irish state pension kicks in, which will be small. €850 a month or so when it does. So 3 years of runway, more if I stretched it. The guest house at €25 a night was eating into that fast. Lynn helped me find a long-term studio apartment 1 street back from the beach, owned by a fella she knew, 8 million dong a month. Call it €290, about €100 a month for electricity once the aircon was running. She negotiated the deposit down for me in Vietnamese in front of me, the landlord nodding sourly. When I tried to slip her a couple of 100,000 dong as a thanks for finding it, she gave me that look again, the cat and the thing on the floor look. I put it away. I bought a second-hand Honda Wave the same week off another fella she vouched for. 12 million dong, about €435, blue, a few scratches, started first kick. She watched the seller test it in front of me and shook her head at the first price he tried. He came down. She watched me hand over the cash and nodded once. "No commission, no finder's fee?" I asked, half joking. She didn't even bother answering. I started seeing her on her days off. Coffee at a place called The Workshop down by the river. A morning at the Marble Mountains where her son came to. A quiet little fella called Bao, 9 years of age, who clung to her hand the whole way up the steps and wouldn't look at me directly for the first hour. By the bottom, he was telling me about Pokemon in a mix of broken English and pure Vietnamese. And I was nodding as if I understood, which I didn't, but Lynn was smiling at the sight of him, and I'll tell you, that was worth more than any of it. I learned a few things about her, in pieces. 38, divorced 4 years. Ex-husband was a drinker. I gathered that without her saying it directly, who saw Bao a few times a year when he remembered. She lived with her mother and Bao in a tube house out past the ring road, 20 minutes on the bike. Her front desk job paid 9 million a month, around €325. She made the rent and the food and the school fees fit inside of that, just barely. She didn't complain. She just listed it once, factually, when I'd asked, the way you'd describe a kitchen you worked in. The English tutor thing came up around month 3. Bao's school had a special program, 1.5 million dong a month, about €55. She was budgeting how to cover it. I said, very casually, "Sure, I can put me hand in for that, no bother." She said no. I said, "Come on, it's nothing to me, it'd help the lad." She said no, polite but firm. I tried again a week later. I thought I was being persistent in a charming way. She probably thought I was being thick. She said, "And I remember this exactly, Mr. Declan. If I take this from you, I am a different woman. Please." I sat with that for a few days. In the end, we worked out a thing. I said, "All right, treat it as a loan." She said, "All right." She got a piece of guest house stationery off the front desk and she wrote it out. 1.5 million a month for 10 months, 15 million total. Repaid back to me at 500,000 a month from her wages. No interest, starting the first of the next month. She signed it. She handed me the pen. I signed it. We made a copy. Honest to God, lads, I don't know what to tell you. I rang Mick that night. I said, "Mick, listen, I'm after meeting a woman over here. Don't laugh." He didn't laugh. He goes, "What's the catch?" And I said, "I don't know yet. That's the thing. There might not be one. She just made me sign a feckin' loan agreement to pay her son's tutor." There was a long pause. Then Mick says, "December. I think she might actually be a decent woman." I said, "Christ knows I'm the worst judge of that on the island." He said, "Ye are, but even a stopped clock." The first time we held hands was a Sunday afternoon along the Han River on the walking promenade. The Dragon Bridge off in the distance, the smell of grilled squid coming off a cart somewhere behind us. She slipped her hand into mine without saying anything. I nearly stopped breathing. I didn't say anything either. We walked another half an hour like that, in and out of the shade. Going up to bed that night on me own in the studio apartment with the fan ticking over me head, I thought to myself, no, Declan, steady. Don't go losing the run of yourself. I did anyway, a bit. But that's the next chapter. Months 4 and 5. I'll tell you about the gallbladder in a minute. Get to the meat of it. But I have to tell you about the mother first, and the lad. Because without the mother and the lad, none of the rest of it makes any sense. Lynn brought me out to the tube house in month 4, a Sunday. We took her bike. She drove. I sat behind. I'm not too proud to say I held onto the back rail with both hands like a child on a roller coaster. 20 minutes through the back lanes, out past the ring road, into one of those neighborhoods where the houses are stacked tight together, all narrow and tall, 3 or 4 stories on a footprint the width of a parking space. Power lines overhead like a plate of black spaghetti. A speaker somewhere blasting the lottery results. Old fellas playing Chinese chess on a plastic table in a doorway. Her mother, Ba Hoa I learned to call her, Ba being grandmother, was about 65 and built like a sparrow, maybe 4'10". Tiny hands. Sharp eyes that went right through you. When I came in, she stayed sitting on her low wooden stool by the family altar. Didn't get up, just looked me up and down like a woman inspecting a fish she wasn't sure about. Lynn said something in Vietnamese. Ba Hoa said something back. Lynn translated, "She say? You are very tall." I bowed a bit. I don't know why I bowed. Ba Hoa cracked the smallest smile in the world and pointed at a stool across from her. I sat. The stool was about 6 inches off the ground. Me knees were up around me chin. She poured me a thimble of green tea and pushed it across without a word. That was the welcome. Took about 2 seconds. But I remember it. The little fella, Bao, was different that day. Maybe because we were on his ground. He showed me his Pokemon cards. He showed me a fish in a glass bowl on a shelf. He showed me a scab on his elbow. At one point, he disappeared upstairs and came back with a homework book and pointed at an English worksheet and said, very seriously, "You teach me." So I sat on the floor of their kitchen with him, and we did present continuous tense for about half an hour, the smell of fish sauce and lemongrass coming from the pot on the stove, an electric fan rattling away in the corner, his mother and grandmother coming and going and pretending not to listen. At the end of it, he said, "Come on, chew, Declan." "Thank you, Uncle Declan." Chew. Uncle. I had to look it up later. I had to sit on the back of the bike on the way home with me, face turned to the wind so Lynn wouldn't see me eyes go. That's how the next month went. Sundays out at the tube house. Bao calling me Chew. Ba Hoa thawing about a degree a week. Me trying to learn a few words of Vietnamese off the YouTube and getting them all wrong because the tones in Cork English don't translate. I'd say what I thought was delicious, and Lynn would put her hand over her mouth laughing because I'd actually said something that meant a horse or a window or some kind of disease. I didn't mind. There's no pride to be had in trying to speak a language at 55. You just keep going. Then, the gallbladder? It came out at a Sunday lunch. Ba Hoa had been getting pains for a while. A scan at the hospital, public hospital, not great, said it was gallstones, surgery needed, the gallbladder out, sooner the better. Lynn told me afterwards in the kitchen, very factually. She wasn't asking me anything. She was telling me what was happening in her family. Public hospital surgery in Vietnam isn't free. There's the operation, the bed, the drugs, the recovery, what they call the envelope for the surgeon to make sure he doesn't take the long route through the wrong organ. The number was 80 million dong, around 2,900 euro. She said the family would pull together. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they'd find it. She didn't ask me to do anything. She didn't even hint. That night, I went home to me studio. I made a cup of tea. I sat on the bed with me banking app open on me phone. 32,000 had become about 28,000 by then. What with the rent and the bike and a few flights I'd taken. 80 million dong was a noticeable lump, but it wasn't the world. I could do it. I could just do it. Transfer it. Be the hero. Be the man who came in and saved Ba Hoa's gallbladder. The man who stepped up. The man Siobhan would have seen if she'd just had the wit to look. That last thought was the giveaway, lads. That's the one I want you to mark. The minute me ex-wife shows up in me reasoning for sending money to someone else's mother, I'm not making a clean decision anymore. I'm settling a different argument with the wrong person. I sat with the app open for about an hour. I typed the number in. I typed it out. I typed it in again. I closed the app. I opened it. I closed it. Eventually, I put the phone face down on the bedside locker and went to sleep, and I didn't sleep great. Next morning, I walked to Highlands Coffee on Bok Jang. Big Sa Fei Suaja sat outside, watched the river. There was a fella at the next table. Big bloke, 60-odd, white mustache, cargo shorts, the build of a man who's been on the tools his whole life. He was reading a paperback and minding his own. Australian flag on his akubra. I'd seen him in a few of the cafes around An Thuong over the months, and we'd nodded at each other once or twice, the way two old white fellas do in a Vietnamese city. I don't know what made me do it. I just leaned over and said, "Sorry, boss. Have you got a minute?" That was Wayne. 67 years of age, 14 years in Da Nang, married to a Vietnamese woman called Mai for 12 of them. 3 grown stepkids he treated as his own. He shut the book and said, "G'day, mate. Yeah, park yourself." I'm not going to give you the whole conversation because half of it was me rambling. The short of it is, I told him about Lynn, about Ba Hoa, about the 80 million, about the banking app open at 1 in the morning. He listened all the way through, didn't interrupt once, sipped his coffee. Then he said very mildly, "Right, so, couple of things, mate, if you'll have it from a stranger." I said I would. He said, "First one, 80 million. That's a number the family came up with for the family. It's not a number for you. The minute you cover the whole 80 million, you've told them the family is now you. And next time it'll be 150. And next time after that, it'll be a house extension. You'll never put the lid back on it. I've seen it. I've watched mates of mine ruin themselves over it. And I've watched the women they loved start to feel ashamed of them at family meals. The shame's the killer." I said, "Right." He said, "Second one. You want to do something? Do something. Don't do nothing. Don't be the foreigner who sat on his hands while his missus's mother needed a surgery. Just don't do everything. Find the number that says, 'I respect this woman, I'm part of this family, and I'm not the bank.' Pick a fifth or a quarter of it. Put it in a red envelope. Hand it to the mother yourself in person. Don't bank transfer it. Don't make a thing of it. Just give it. The family raises the rest. Everyone keeps their face, including yours." He paused, and then he said the line I've never forgotten. He said, "Mate, if you wouldn't do it for an Irish girl after 8 months, don't do it for a Vietnamese one. If you wouldn't have written a check for 2.5 grand to your missus's mother in Cork in the first 6 months, you can't write it here. The geography doesn't change the maths." I sat with that for a long time after he went home. What I did. I withdrew 20 million dong in cash, about 720 euro. I went to a little stationery shop on the next street and bought a red envelope and a pen. I wrote Ba Hoa's name on it the best I could in Vietnamese. I put the cash inside. That Sunday at the Tube House after lunch, when Ba Hoa was sitting on her stool and the dishes were being cleared, I went over and I sat down across from her on the low stool, and I held the envelope out in both hands the way I'd seen Lynn do at Tet. I said the few words I'd been practicing on the back of the bike. Ba Hoa, Suk Kue, Keen Tang. For your health, with respect. I made an absolute hames of the tones, I'm sure. She didn't say anything for a long second. Then she took the envelope in both hands. She didn't open it. She just held it. She looked at me for a moment with those sparrow eyes and she nodded once, slow, and she said in English, "Mr. Declan, thank you." And that was the only English I ever heard her speak. The remaining 60 million was raised by the aunts and uncles and a couple of the cousins inside of about a week. The surgery went grand. Ba Hoa came home after 4 days, walking a bit slower for a fortnight, then back to slapping Bao on the back of the head when he got cheeky. Nobody, and I want you to hear this, nobody ever came back to me looking for more. Not for the operation, not for the recovery, not for anything. Later that week, I caught Lynn in the kitchen of her mother's house when she didn't know I was there. She was at the sink. She had her back to the door. She was crying, very quietly, the way ye cry when you don't want anyone to hear. I stepped back into the hallway before she saw me. I didn't bring it up that night or any night. There's some things you let the other person have to themselves. That night, on the back of her bike on the way home through the dark, with the smell of charcoal smoke and rain coming off the road, I realized I'd been in Vietnam 4 months. 4 months. And I was happier than I'd been in 5 years. Properly happier. Not drunk happier, not distracted happier, the bone kind. And the second I realized it, I distrusted it immediately. Because the last time I'd been that happy, I'd been married to Siobhan, and she was already unbeknownst to me in some hotel in Lisbon ruining the rest of me life. I held onto the rail at the back of the bike a bit tighter, and I thought, all right, steady. Watch yourself, Declan. Watch yourself. I didn't watch myself well enough, but that's the next chapter. Months 6 and 7 were the quiet ones. The good ones. The ones I have to remind myself I had, because the trouble that came after has a way of crowding them out in me memory. What was different about them was that nothing was different about them. You know what I mean. Lynn and I were a couple by then in a way nobody had to announce. Sundays at the Tube House, a weeknight or two at me studio when she could get away, coffee at the workshop on a Saturday morning if she was off. We'd settled into a rhythm. She still wouldn't move in. Ba Hoa, post-surgery, had decreed that until further notice I'd sleep on the mattress in the front room when I stayed over. And Lynn up in her own room with Bao. I'd no problem with that. There was something steadying about it, actually. The mattress had a flowery cover and was about 3 inches off the tile floor. 3:30 every morning, the rooster from the next house over would start in on me. 2 or 3 motorbikes would rasp past in the alley. I'd lie there listening to the house breathing, Bao whispering something to himself in his sleep upstairs, Ba Hoa making her tea. And I'd think, this is a house. This is what a house feels like. Then the plumbing started. Look, lads, you don't spend 28 years under cork sinks and not have hands that twitch when you see a dripping tap. The kitchen tap in the Tube House had been weeping into a chipped saucer since me first visit. The cistern in the upstairs toilet ran on after every flush. Of course it did. The fittings out here are mostly half-decent imports from Korea or China, but the installs are often rushed by lads who learned on the job. One Saturday afternoon, I asked Lynn, very casually, did she mind if I had a look. She said, do what you like. The tap was a 5-minute job, the cistern was 20. I ended up doing a few small bits I noticed, reseating a U-bend on the bathroom sink that had been hand-tightened and was starting to seep, swapping a perished washer in the kitchen that I'd brought down with me from Meebag because I never left the apartment without a few bits, force of habit. By the time I came back down, I had black hands, and Ba Hoa was looking at me the way you'd look at a dog that had brought you a pheasant. Then the next-door neighbor came in. Then the lady from 2 doors up. Word in a Vietnamese hem goes faster than the bin lorry. Inside of about 3 weeks, I'd done plumbing for, 6 houses on that lane? They tried to pay me. I waved it off. Ba Hoa, of all people, took me aside after the second one and said something in Vietnamese to Lynn, very firm, that Lynn translated as, she say you must take the money. If you do not take the money, they cannot ask you again. They will be ashamed. That was a lesson on its own. I'd never thought about it that way. So I started taking it. 200,000 here, 300 there, sometimes a bag of mangoes or a tray of Bon Zao and Lou. Nothing serious money, but proper money in its way. Then Wayne sent me a Korean fella in An Thuong with a busted boiler. 3 hours, parts I sourced myself from a place on Hoang Sa, 600,000 dong. Then the Korean fella told a Dutch lad. Then the Dutch lad told someone else. By month 7, I had a notebook with 8 or 9 names in it, and I was making, give or take, 10 to 15 million dong a month doing odd jobs for foreigners around Son Tra and in Thuong. That's 300 to 500 euro on top of me savings. Not a wage, but not nothing. 28 years of work in me hands, and they still worked. I won't lie to you lads, the first time I cashed 3 crisp 500,000 notes off a fella for a half-day's job, I sat on the bike afterwards and felt something in me chest unfreeze that I hadn't known was frozen. Then month 8, then the cousin, Tuan. Tuan was a piece of work. I'll try and be fair to him. He was Lynn's first cousin on her mother's side. Mid-30s, ran some sort of property outfit in Hoi An, drove a black Toyota Camry, which is a flash motor in those parts, wore polished shoes to family lunches. He'd been polite to me up till then, distant, sort of weighing me. At a Sunday lunch in month 8, he sat down beside me with a beer in his hand and said, Anne Declan, I have something to discuss with you, important, family. He pitched the cafe right there at the table. He had a folder. He'd brought a folder to a Sunday lunch. I should have clocked that. I didn't. He had photos of a unit in Hoi An Old Town, a few streets back from the river. 600 million dong total, about 21,500 euro, to take over an existing fit-out, get the license transferred, and have it running inside of 2 months. Coffee, smoothies, banh mi, the works. Guaranteed 30% annual return. His exact word. Guaranteed. Spreadsheets. Photos of the previous owner's footfall. A document with stamps on it that looked very official. He pointed out calmly that, as a foreigner, I couldn't hold the license. Vietnamese law, nothing to be done. And so the registration would be in his name. But he and I would have a side agreement. Between family, protecting me interest. We are family now, and Declan, he said. I'm not going to lie to ye. For about 2 days, I wanted it. I wanted it the way you want something when you're trying to be a different man. 21.5 grand was 2/3 of what I had left, give or take. I went down to Hoi An on the bike, an hour south, lovely run along the coast, and I walked the old town for 2 days, pretending to do due diligence. Pretending? I drank cafe trung on a low stool watching tourists wander past lantern shops. I imagined myself behind a counter with an apron on, pulling shots. A fella who owned something. I imagined ringing Mick and saying, by the way, I have a cafe now. I knew, even as I imagined it, that I was not really doing maths. I was looking for permission. What stopped me was a phone call. Wayne, Skype, tea time. I asked him straight, should I do it? He said, mate, I won't tell you that. Wouldn't be right, but I'll ask you 4 questions, and if you can answer all 4, you're flying. He said, 1. If the relationship ends in the morning, what stops Tuan from selling the cafe tomorrow afternoon and keeping the money? I said, the side agreement. He said, what court enforces a side agreement between a foreigner with no license and a Vietnamese citizen who's the registered owner? I said, well. He said, 2. What's Tuan's track record? Has he run a cafe before? A restaurant? Anything? I said, he works in property. He said, 3. The 30% guaranteed return. Who guarantees it? Out of what? I said, I didn't know. He said 4. If you lose the lot of it, what do you live on for the next 6 years until your pension kicks in? I sat on the line with the fan ticking over me head, and I didn't have an answer for that one either. He said, mate, there's your answer. Don't sign anything. Tell him no. Be polite. Don't shame him in front of the family. But don't sign anything. I came off the call and sat on the bed for a long time. That night, Lynn came over, cooked us com tam in me little kitchen with the smell of Nuck Mom filling the studio. She was quiet. I was quiet. I sat down across from her at the fold-out table and I said, I'm not doing the cafe. She put down her chopsticks, she looked at the tablecloth, and she said very quietly, thank you, Declan. And then it came out of her in a rush. She'd been dreading the pitch for weeks. For weeks, lads. Because she'd seen Tuan try this before. He'd burned a cousin out in Quang Nam with a similar deal 6 years ago. He'd burned an uncle by marriage with another one 3 years ago. The family had the same arguments at every tet and never resolved them because nobody wanted to break face by saying it out loud. She hadn't told me, she said, because it is not my place to speak against the family. He is my cousin. You are not Vietnamese. I cannot be the one to say. I said, Lynn, you should have told me. She said, I know, I am sorry. I sat with that one for a few minutes. I'll tell you honestly, a little part of me was a touch annoyed. But the bigger part of me understood. There's a thing in Vietnamese family life that I'm only starting to grasp at 55. The way blood loyalty cuts harder than truth. The way you'd swallow a bad business deal sooner than embarrass your cousin in front of his auntie. She'd been carrying that on her own for a month. She'd been praying I'd say no without her ever having to say it. Tuan? I told him no 2 days later, on the phone, in the politest words I could manage. He went very quiet, then he said, I see, and Declan, I see. And he hung up. He didn't speak to Lynn for nearly a month after. He made a couple of needling comments at the next family lunch, something about how some men are not businessmen, they are workers, that I caught the gist of even without translation. Lynn bristled. Ba Hoa, of all people, told him to be quiet at his own table. The face the lad made. I'll never forget it. Lynn stood her ground. She took the family pressure for me. I sat on a low stool eating noodles and watched a 38-year-old woman absorb a fortnight of frosty silences and arch comments at family meals on me behalf. And I realized, properly realized, I'd not had anyone on me side in that way in about 10 years. Not really. Siobhan, by the end, had been on her own side. Probably for longer than I'd known. Lynn was on mine. The Zalo message came late that month. I was at me studio 11:30 at night. A friend request from a Vietnamese woman I didn't know. I accepted it because I'm an Egypt. Inside of 2 minutes, a message in broken English. Hello, sir? I am friend of Lynn, my daughter. She needs school fee. Please can you help me? Thank you, sir. 200,000 dong. Tiny number, €8.50. The kind of ask you'd nearly pay just to make it stop. I didn't pay. I screenshot it and showed Lynn in the morning. I have never seen Lynn angry before that morning. She went a color I didn't know her face could go. She made me hand her Me phone. She typed a long message in Vietnamese. Then she rang the woman on Zalo. Then she went out into the alley to take the call so I wouldn't have to listen. When she came back in, she said, very tightly, "She is not my friend. She is a woman I worked with at my last job. She has done this before to other people. I am sorry, Declan. I am so sorry." She apologized for an hour, lads. To me, for another woman. As if she'd let me down by knowing the woman in the first place. I told her stop. I told her stop. I told her, you don't owe me an apology for someone else's behavior. She wouldn't let it go. In the end, I just held her hand at the table. That evening, the apartment quiet. The karaoke from the bar across the lane bleeding through the window. Some young one murdering a Westlife song of all things. We sat on me couch and didn't say much. Both of us knowing something had moved. 8 months in, 2 near misses dodged. A small business income off me hands. A woman across from me on a couch who'd taken a face-losing fight with her own cousin to keep me from being conned by her family. And me thinking very quietly on the inside, no, Declan, this is not how the YouTube videos go. I should have gone to bed grateful. I should have slept like a baby that night. Instead, when she went home around 11, I sat up till 1 in the morning with a Bia Saigon in me hand, and I started thinking. Just thinking. Just sort of poking at it. Why was she so angry, like, so fast? Was that real anger? Or was that performed? And the loan agreement she'd written out at month 3. Was that real, or was that a long con? And the way she'd known for a fact about Tuan before he opened his mouth? Was that her caring, or was that her managing me? I want you to mark this moment, lads. Mark it. Because this is the bit where I nearly ruined it myself. I'd survived the gallbladder. I'd survived the cafe. I'd survived a stranger trying to scam me on Zalo. What I was about to fail to survive was the sound of me own head, on its own, in the dark after midnight. But that's the next chapter. Right. 1000 going to tell you this part because it has to be told, but I'm not proud of it. None of it. If you think less of me by the end of it, fair enough. I'd think less of myself if I were you, and I do anyway, so we're even. Months 9 and 10, I went a bit mad in the head. Quietly. The kind of mad you don't show anybody. On the outside, I was the same Declan, going to Sundays at the Tube House, fixing a Belgian fella's washing machine for 800,000, sitting beside Lynn on the couch watching some Korean drama she liked with the subtitles on, smiling and nodding. On the inside, I was a fella in a small dark room with a torch, looking at the walls. The first thing I did, I'm just going to say it. She was in the shower one evening at me studio. Her phone was on the kitchen counter beside the kettle. She hadn't a passcode on it. I picked it up. I opened her Zalo. I scrolled. I scrolled her Facebook Messenger. I scrolled her gallery. I scrolled her bank app, which was in Vietnamese, and I couldn't read most of it, but I could read the numbers. And the numbers were small numbers. Wages going in, rent going out, groceries, tutors. The fella up the road who fixes her bike. Nothing. Not a man's name I didn't know. Not a hidden chat. Not a thing. I put the phone back exactly where it was. The shower stopped. She came out in one of me t-shirts with her hair wet, toweling it, and she smiled at me. I smiled back, and I felt in that moment like I needed a wash that no shower would give me. Lads, if there's one bit of this story I want you to take with you more than any other, it's this. When a man goes through another woman's phone, he doesn't find out about her. He finds out about himself. And what I found out about meself wasn't pretty. It didn't stop me, mind. It got worse. There was an English fella I'd done a job for, lived in An Thuong a few years, spoke decent enough Vietnamese to get by. I asked him over a pint at the place with the red plastic stools. Very casual, very offhand. Would he ever do me a favor? Ask around about Lynn, just sort of casually. Was she known? Was she good? Was there anything? I made it sound like prudence. He looked at me a long second over his tiger and said, "Mate, you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, just to put me mind at ease like." He did it. 2 weeks later, he came back and said, "She's known as a hard worker, single mother, good with the kid. The mother is well respected in the lane. That's it, mate. There's nothing." I bought him another pint. I went home feeling worse than before, because I'd had to spend a bit of money to have a stranger confirm what I already knew, and what did that say about me? The Tinder thing. This is the most embarrassing one. One night, late, when she'd gone home, half cut on cans, I downloaded Tinder onto me phone and put up a fake profile, made up a name, stole some young fella's photo off the internet, set the location to An Thuong, set the age range, started swiping. I told myself I was looking. I knew within about 4 minutes she wasn't on it, because she's never been on a thing like that in her life and wouldn't know how. I deleted the app at 1:30 in the morning. The phone felt warm in me hand like it had caught a sickness off me. There was one more thing. I'm only telling you because I want you to know how far down I went. I sat one afternoon at Highlands Coffee, not the one Wayne used, a different one. I didn't want him seeing me. And I Googled private investigator Da Nang English speaking. There are fellas who do it, mostly for foreign companies running checks on local hires. I read the websites. I read the prices. 5-6 million dong for a basic background, 20 for a full report with photos. I sat there with me thumb hovering over a contact form for a long 15 minutes. And then a small woman pushed a tray of bon bao past me table, on her way to a customer, and I caught the smell of it. The steamed pork. And something in me turned over. I closed the laptop, I went out and sat by the river for 2 hours feeling physically sick at myself. I want you to understand, there were no warning signs. None. Not a single one. The signs in the relationship had all gone the other way for 10 months. The signs were all in me head. The signs were the divorce I hadn't finished having. The signs were the daughters who wouldn't ring. The signs were Siobhan in Lisbon with the soft-handed fucker. I'd just attached them to the wrong woman because the wrong woman was no longer available to me. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Lynn notices everything. I'd been distant for about a fortnight. Short answers, half listening. Going up onto me roof with a beer when she came over on a Tuesday and pretending I needed the air. She didn't push. She gave me space. Then on a Thursday evening, the two of us at me kitchen table eating pho she'd brought from a place near her work, she put her chopsticks down and she said, very gentle, "Declan, what is wrong, please? You can tell me." I want ye to imagine the ceiling fan ticking, the smell of the broth, the little karaoke wail bleeding in from down the lane, a woman across from me who had given me 10 months of nothing but straight dealing, asking me what was wrong. And I broke. I broke right open. I told her everything. The phone, the asking around, the Tinder, the private investigator I hadn't quite hired. I sat there with me hands flat on the table, and I told her the lot of it. I said, "I'm sorry, love. I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't believe a thing this good is real." I expected her to leave. I expected her to stand up, take her bag, and walk out the door without a word, and that to be the end. I'd have deserved it. She didn't leave, not at first. She sat very still, and her face did a thing I'd never seen it do. Went very calm and very white. Then she started crying, but quietly, the way she cried, no big sounds. Then the anger came up. And lads, when Lynn got angry, properly angry, it was a thing to behold. Quiet, controlled, every word picked. She said, "I have given you in 10 months no reason, not one reason. I have written you a paper for a tutor. I have refused your money. I have told you the truth about my family even when it shamed them. I have stood between you and my own cousin. And in return, you have looked through my phone. You have paid a man to ask about me in my own street. You have made a fake account to test me." She said, "Declan, I am not your wife. I am not Siobhan. I will not spend my life being audited. That last one. That one I felt in me bones. She got up, she put her shoes on, she picked up her helmet, and she said, I am going home to my mother. For some days, I cannot be here tonight. She didn't slam the door, she just closed it. I heard her bike start up in the alley and I heard it go. 3 days I sat in that studio, the fan ticking, the karaoke from the bar across the way like a knife in me ear. I didn't eat properly. I went down to the Be Ahoy place on the corner once and had 2 cans and couldn't taste them. I sent her one message on day 1. I'm sorry, please. She read it and didn't reply. I sent her one on day 2. I'll do whatever you want. Read. No reply. Day 3, I sent nothing because by then I understood I wasn't owed a reply. On day 3, I rang Wayne. He came over. He sat across from me on me couch, took one look at me and said, Mate, you're a fucking Egypt. I said, I know. He said, you've been treating her like a suspect for 10 months. The miracle isn't that she's still here. The miracle is that she ever was. He let me sit with that for a bit. Then he said, right. Tomorrow morning, you buy flowers. Proper ones, not the petrol station rubbish. You go to her mother's house, not hers. Her mother's. You apologize to Ba Hoa first, before Lin. You sit on the low stool. You say sorry in Vietnamese, however bad. You let the mother be the judge. And then if Lin comes down, you apologize to her. And you don't say a single word in your own defense. Not one. You don't explain. You don't give context. You just say sorry. And you take whatever she gives you. I went the next morning. Day 4. I bought a bunch of flowers from a woman on the corner, orange and white. I picked them badly. The woman wrapping them was looking at me like I was about to attend me own funeral. I drove out on the wave. 20 minutes through the Da Nang traffic, sweating into me good shirt. I sat in front of Ba Hoa on the low stool. I held the flowers out in both hands. I said, in the worst Vietnamese you've ever heard, Ba Hoa, Con Shin Loi. I'm sorry, Con. Child, the polite form. I'd practiced it on the way over. I said it once, properly, then I looked at the floor. She let me sit there. She didn't say a word for a long time. Then she said something in Vietnamese to one of her grandchildren who'd appeared in the doorway, and the child trotted upstairs, and a moment later Lin came down. Ba Hoa pointed at the stool across from me, made Lin sit on it, and then Ba Hoa got up off her own stool and walked out into the kitchen, very deliberate, leaving us. Lin sat. I sat. I said, I'm sorry. That was it. I didn't say another word. I'd promised Wayne. And it was the right call because I'd nothing to say that wasn't an excuse. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, very quiet, if you do this again, any of it, once, I am gone. You understand me, Declan. Once. I said, I understand. She said, then come home with me tonight. Mama is making bun bo hu. Bao wants to show you a new game on his phone. That was it. No big speech, no happy ending music. She just got up and went into the kitchen and started chopping spring onions like nothing had happened, except she didn't look at me for the whole afternoon, and she didn't touch me when we walked out to the bike at the end of it. The forgiveness wasn't free. It wasn't going to be free for a long time. I got it that I was on probation, lads, and I was grateful for the probation. That night I went home to me studio on me own. She went up to bed with Bao at her mother's, and I opened me laptop and booked a 4-night trip to Phu Quoc, Long Beach, a small family-run place near the South End. 18 million dong all in for the 3 of us. Flights from Da Nang, the room, breakfast, 650 euro. I didn't agonize about it. I didn't sit there with me banking app open at 1 in the morning. I booked it, paid for it, took the screenshot, and sent it to her without a message attached. She replied about an hour later, just one word. Thank you. I closed the laptop. I lay down on the bed with the fan ticking over me head. And I thought, you stupid old bastard. You nearly threw it all away over the sound of your own head at midnight. And I went to sleep. That's the chapter, lads. That's the bit I don't tell at parties. Last one's the next one. Phu Quoc, then. Month 11. We flew down on a Tuesday morning out of Da Nang International. Lin, Bao, and me. The lad had never been on a plane before. He sat between us with his face glued to the window and didn't say a word the whole way down. He had a packet of crisps Lynn had brought. He didn't open them. 40,000 feet up over the Gulf of Thailand, and he wouldn't open his crisp because he didn't want to miss anything out the window. The place I'd booked was a small family-run guest house near the south end of Long Beach. Yellow walls, a small pool with a couple of those plastic palm tree umbrellas, a grandmother out the front sweeping the same patch of tile every morning. Bao took one look at the sea, proper turquoise, not the dark Da Nang kind, and he was off, shoes flying, into the surf in his shorts. Lynn and I stood on the sand watching him, and she leaned her head against me's shoulder for the first time since the night she'd walked out of me's studio. I'm not going to give you every minute of the 4 nights. They were the 4 nights. You know what they were. The lad with sunburn on the second day because he wouldn't sit under the umbrella. A bowl of bun quay from a place down the road that I still think about. Lynn in a yellow sundress laughing at me trying to swim in the pool. The 3 of us eating squid at a Quan Now off the main strip with the karaoke going next door, and Bao nodding off at the table at 9:30. The bit I want to tell you about is the boat back. We took the speedboat from Phu Quoc back to Rach Gia on the mainland. Bao wanted the boat instead of the flight, and the maths worked out the same. And about halfway across, the engine settled into that drone, the sea outside a flat gray-green, the aircon blowing weakly. Bao conked out across me legs with his head on me thigh, sticky with sun cream, sleeping like a stone. Lynn fell asleep on me shoulder. Her hair smelled of the cheap hotel shampoo. Out the window the sea went on for miles. And I sat there for 2 hours not moving, holding very still so I wouldn't wake either of them, and I thought, very plainly, this is not a holiday I'm having. This is me life. 12 months, a year. I'd come over with 32,000 euro and a heart and bits, and I was sitting on a boat in the Gulf of Thailand with another man's son asleep on me legs, and that man's ex-wife asleep on me shoulder. And the bit of me that had been frozen on the stool at the Bridge Inn for 18 months had thawed. Quietly. Without me noticing exactly when. Let me give you the maths, lads, because I owe you that. I came over with about 32,000 euro. A year in, I've spent, and I checked this with a pencil in the back of an envelope last week, because I don't trust myself with banking apps anymore. About 11,000. Rent at $290 a month for 10 months. The bike. The gallbladder gift, 20 million dong. The flights down to Phu Quoc and the 4 nights. A few flights to Cambodia and back for visa runs. Coffees and dinners and beers. A few hundred euro on tools so I could do the plumbing properly. 11 grand, give or take a few hundred. I've 21,000 left in the Bank of Ireland account. 6.5 years until me state pension kicks in at 850 euro a month, give or take. The plumbing brings in, on a slow month, 10 million dong. On a busy month, 15, maybe 17. If Wayne sends me 3 jobs, call it 300 to 500 euro on top of the savings, all of it cash. Now I know, before any of you write in, that's not technically all above board. Working hours on a tourist visa? I know. I'm working on the visa side of it with a fella Lynn knows who does business visas through a tour company. It's not glamorous and it's not free, but it's doable. The 5-year visa for spouses of Vietnamese citizens is not somewhere we are right now, and I'd want to be a long way down probation before that conversation starts. We're not there. I'm aware. What this means all in is that I'm not bleeding the savings. I'm topping them up some months. A year on, me finances are better than they were in Cork. Me Cork life had me slowly drinking down the divorce settlement on the same stool. Me Da Nang life has me banking some of it. Tell that to the fella I was 18 months ago at the Bridge Inn and he wouldn't have believed ye. The other side of the ledger, the one I want you to hear too. The girls still don't ring me. I send a message every birthday. I sent a Christmas card last December with a 100 euro note in each. The cards weren't returned. The notes weren't either. The messages are read, never replied. I've made me peace with the possibility that this might be the rest of me life. I'd be a liar if I said I have. Some Sunday evenings sitting at Lynn's mother's table while Bao whinges about his maths homework and Ba Hoa slaps him on the back of the head with a tea towel, I get a feeling I can't always swallow down, that this lovely table only has me at it because 2 other tables in Cork don't. Grief and gratitude in the same chest. Both true at once, they sit together. I'm getting better at letting them. A few names you should hear. There's a Canadian fella in Hoi An. He took the cafe deal Tuan pitched me. 600 million dong, same lad. Same spreadsheets. Same notarized-looking document, I'd bet you. The cafe opened. It limped. Tuan started taking expenses off the top. The Canadian and Tuan fell out around month 7. The Canadian had no license in his name, no enforceable contract, no Vietnamese to speak of, and no leg to stand on. The cafe shut at month 11. I saw the fella once at Highlands afterwards. He had that 1,000-yard stare on him. I bought him a Safé Suaja and we didn't say much. There but for the grace of God, lads. There but for the grace of God. And Wayne's 4 questions. There's an English fella in Son Tra who built a house on his Vietnamese girlfriend's family's land. Foreigners can't own land here. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Cannot. He thought he had a workaround. He didn't. They split. The house is theirs now. He's back in Manchester living with his sister. And there's an American fella who sits at Highlands every Friday with Wayne. Same conversation every week about a woman who's costing him money he hasn't got. Wayne talks. The American nods. The American does not change anything. Some lads come here and learn. Some lads come here and just keep paying. I don't say any of that to feel superior. I'm a one-woman gallbladder envelope and a phone-checking session away from being any of them. The only difference between me and the Canadian is 4 questions on a Skype call and a woman who didn't leave when she had every right to. So, the lesson, lads. I've been chewing on this for weeks because I knew you'd ask and I want to give you it straight. Vietnam didn't save me. I want to be very clear about that. The country didn't fix me. Da Nang isn't a magic place. The girls didn't make me whole. The cheap rent didn't undo the divorce. None of that happened. What happened is I came here with a busted heart, and at some point, somewhere between the gallbladder envelope and the boat ride back from Po Quoc, I stopped trying to use this country to buy back what me ex-wife took. That's the trick. It's the only trick. Half the lads I've met here are still trying to buy it. They want a younger woman, a bigger gesture, a cafe with their name over the door, anything that says they weren't the lad who got left. And the women, most of them not bad women, by the way, just women with families and bills like everyone else, can smell that need a mile off and the smarter ones step around it, and the harder ones make a meal of it. And the lads end up worse than they started. If I'd given Tuan the 600 million, I'd be back in Bishopstown by now. If I'd transferred the 80 million for the gallbladder, the family would have come back for the next 80, and I'd have ended up resentful and broke and ashamed at me own kitchen table. If I hadn't said it out loud to Lynn that I'd been through her phone, I'd have rotted inside that secret until it ate the relationship anyway, and I'd be telling you a different story. The discipline came first. Always the discipline. Then the relationship. Not the other way round. If you're watching this with 32 grand and a broken heart, lads, hear me. Don't get on the plane to be a different man. Get on the plane to be the same man, with better surroundings and slower bills. Find a Wayne. Listen to him when he asks you 4 questions you can't answer. Say no when you can't say yes for the right reasons. Sign loan agreements with the people you love. Carry a red envelope. Don't go through her phone. And when you nearly do, like I did, tell her you did. The truth comes back at you like a slap, but it's better than what the lying turns into. I don't know how this story ends. Could be next month she tells me to feck off and I'd have it coming. Could be in 5 years she's me wife and I'm fixing taps in Son Tra until I drop. I don't know. Nobody does. What I know is this Sunday I'll be on the back of her bike, with Bao squashed in the middle of us. He insists on the middle, going to Ba Hoaz for lunch. Lynn drives. Da Nang traffic terrifies me. She laughs at me for that. The lad calls me Chew. The mother sends me jars of pickled cabbage when there's too much. That's me life in 12 months. That's the thing that grew where I stopped trying to plant something. That's me story, lads. Take what you want from it. Take none of it if you'd rather. But for the love of God, do me one favor. If you're heading out here, deal with the fella in the mirror first. Then come. Welcome back. That was Declan O'Sullivan in Da Nang, 12 months in. This is the story we don't tell often enough on Inside Vietnam, and we should. The cautionary tales pull the views. The men who lost the house, the savings, the dignity, and we're going to keep telling those because lads need to hear them. But every now and then somebody walks into the same trap and walks out the other side. And we owe it to you to show you that one too. Because if all you ever heard from this channel was disaster, You'd think Vietnam was the problem. Vietnam isn't the problem. Vietnam is just where the problem some men have been carrying since their divorce or their redundancy, or their wife's funeral finally meets a country that asks them to make decisions with money. The country isn't doing it to them. They are. What did Declan do that the others don't? Listen, because this is the practical bit. He paid his own rent from month one and never commingled. He turned the English tutor offer into a written, repaid loan when she wouldn't take a gift. He gave a quarter of the family's gallbladder ask in cash in a red envelope, in person. Not the whole thing, not by transfer, not in the dark. He walked away from a turnkey cafe investment with no license in his name and no enforceable contract, even when he wanted it badly. He found an older expat, a Wayne, and listened to him. And when he started behaving like a paranoid Egypt, he confessed it himself before it rotted the relationship from the inside, and he took the consequences without arguing. None of those things are romantic. All of them are boring. Boring is what works. If you're sitting at home tonight watching this with 32 grand and a broken heart, hear what Declan said. Vietnam isn't the answer. The work you do before you get on the plane is the answer. Find your Wayne in your own town. Have your hard conversations with yourself in your own kitchen. Practice saying no to people you love. Then, if you still want to come, come. Da Nang will be here. So will the cafes that look turnkey, and the cousins with folders, and the women who will love you and also need help with the rent. Both things, often, at the same time. None of that goes away because you've done your homework. But your homework is what stops you being the next story we have to tell. Right. If this one helped, give it a like, leave us a comment, and share it with the lad in your life who's quietly watching the same kind of YouTube videos at 4 in the morning that Declan was watching in Bishopstown. He's the one we made it for. We'll see you next time. Inside Vietnam isn't here to scare you away from this country. It's here to help the ones who come arrive with their eyes open. Mind yourselves, lads, and mind each other.